The deepest wounds aren't inflicted by enemies. They come from the family who should cherish you most. For 38 years, I poured everything into creating a beautiful life for my daughter Kendall. I worked 60-hour weeks at my law firm, sacrificed vacations, lived in a cramped apartment just to afford her private education, piano lessons, and eventually an Ivy League degree. I dreamed of giving her everything I never had growing up. But sometimes when you give people everything, they forget the value of anything, especially basic human decency. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I never imagined I'd spend Thanksgiving dinner alone in a freezing garage among dusty lawn equipment and chemical solvents, while my daughter and her husband hosted an extravagant dinner party just on the other side of the wall. I never thought Kendall would allow her husband Xander to treat me like something shameful to be hidden away. And I certainly never expected that amid my humiliation, I'd discover the legal leverage that would change everything, a mortgage I'd forgotten I still held on their showcase mansion. The very next morning, I initiated foreclosure proceedings that would leave them homeless by Christmas. My name is Gloria Winters. I built Winters Family Law from nothing but determination and an outdated laptop in my bedroom. Through relentless work and meticulous attention to detail, I transformed it into one of the most respected boutique family law practices in Riverbrook. My clients trusted me with their most sensitive matters: divorces, custody battles, estate disputes, and I prided myself on both compassion and unwavering precision. Nothing escaped my notice, especially when it came to legal documents. This attention to detail would ultimately be my daughter's undoing. Kendall was just 8 when her father walked out, claiming he wasn't cut out for responsibility. He left me with crushing debt and a confused little girl who couldn't understand why Daddy wasn't coming home anymore. I didn't have time for self-pity. The very next morning, I was up at 4:30 making Kendall's breakfast, preparing her lunch, and reviewing case files before dropping her at school. For years, our routine never varied. I worked through her bedtime, caught a few hours of sleep when possible, and devoted every spare moment to ensuring Kendall had everything she needed, emotionally and materially. When her braces needed adjustment, I took on extra mediation cases. When her school computer broke, I skipped lunch for a month to save for a replacement. When college acceptance letters arrived, I refinanced our modest home to cover what scholarships didn't provide. "Nothing is going to hold you back," I promised her. "You'll have every opportunity I never had." Perhaps I shielded her too completely from life's harsh realities. Maybe I created too comfortable a cushion between Kendall and the sacrifice required to maintain her privileged existence. Whatever the reason, my daughter grew up with expensive tastes and a concerning blindness to the effort behind them. By the time she met Xander Harrington during her final semester at Princeton, Kendall had come to expect the lifestyle my endless work had provided. Xander came from what he called established money, though I later discovered this establishment only stretched back to his father's generation. Henry Harrington had built Harrington Capital from a small investment firm into a regional financial services powerhouse that specialized in leveraged real estate deals. Xander had grown up surrounded by luxury and entitlement, and it showed in everything from his casual arrogance to his dismissive treatment of service workers. From our first meeting, something about Xander felt wrong. His charm never quite reached. His eyes, which remained calculating even when his mouth smiled. But Kendall was utterly captivated. "He's already a junior partner at his father's firm," she gushed during one of our increasingly rare phone calls. "We're going to have an amazing life, Mom. The kind I deserve." I bit my tongue, disturbed by her wording but reluctant to criticize. Who was I to judge? Perhaps I was simply being overprotective or jealous of sharing her affection. So I smiled and kept my reservations to myself, a decision I would come to regret profoundly. 6 months after graduation, they were engaged. A year later, They had a wedding that cost more than my annual income, most of which I covered by liquidating a significant portion of my retirement portfolio. It's just money, I told myself, watching Kendall radiate happiness as she danced, with Xander beneath imported crystal chandeliers. Her joy is what matters. For the first few years of their marriage, things remained relatively cordial. Xander joined Harrington Capital as expected, rapidly advancing through titles that seemed suspiciously created just for him. Kendall didn't work. Xander says it would reflect poorly on the family if people thought he couldn't provide for his wife, she explained. Instead, she threw herself into becoming the perfect corporate spouse, hosting dinner parties and charity events while I continued building my law practice. I kept my distance, visiting only when invited, careful not to impose. After all, they lived in Oakwood Heights, the most exclusive neighborhood in Riverbrook, in a sprawling Tudor mansion that made my modest home look like servants' quarters by comparison. I continued expanding my firm, eventually growing to 12 attorneys and moving into proper offices downtown. By the time I turned 58, Winter's family law was valued at over $5.2 million. Not a fortune by Harrington standards, but enough to ensure I'd have a comfortable retirement when the time came. Then, 3 years ago, everything changed. Henry Harrington suffered a devastating stroke. After weeks in the hospital, he recovered enough to communicate, but the doctors were clear. His days of running Harrington Capital were over. Xander was suddenly thrust into the role of CEO, and the pressure was immense. Dad built this firm over 30 years, he confided during a rare moment of vulnerability at a family dinner. The board expects me to just step in and take over. But I'm drowning, Gloria. These leveraged property deals are complicated and the financing structures are a nightmare. I felt a twinge of sympathy despite our differences. I understood the weight of responsibility, the pressure of stepping into shoes that seemed too large to fill. I could take a look at the legal structures, I offered. Perhaps give you some perspective on restructuring the debt obligations. For once, Xander didn't dismiss me. Instead, he took me up on my offer, and the next day I found myself in the Harrington Capital headquarters, surrounded by financial prospectuses and loan documents that told a troubling story. The company had overextended itself on several luxury property developments just before the real estate market cooled. Cash flow was tight, and several high-interest loans were coming due within months. I spent 2 weeks reorganizing their legal approach, negotiating with lenders, and creating a sustainable path forward. I didn't charge a penny. This was family. After all, when I presented my solution to Xander and the board, the relief in the room was palpable. Gloria, this is remarkable, the CFO said, reviewing my proposals. You've given us a fighting chance. Xander was effusive in his thanks, inviting me to Sunday dinners and actually listening to my input on business matters. For a brief, shining moment, I thought I'd finally earned his respect. Kendall seemed proud of my contribution, and I allowed myself to believe our relationship might deepen. How naive I was. As Harrington Capital stabilized over the next year, I watched Xander's demeanor shift. The gratitude faded, replaced by the old condescension. His calls became less frequent, and Sunday dinners dwindled away. When I did see them, I noticed subtle changes in their home. New imported furniture, a second luxury car, designer clothes for Kendall. Despite my financial guidance emphasizing conservative spending while the company recovered, my law practice continued to thrive during this period. I had developed a specialization in complex property divisions for high-net-worth divorces, and my reputation for finding hidden assets made me the attorney of choice for Riverbrook's elite when marriages crumbled. The irony of this expertise would soon become apparent. Last summer, I received a call from Kendall that sent my world spinning. "Mom, I need to ask you something important," she began, an unusual hesitancy in her voice. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Xander and I are planning to renovate the East Wing and add an indoor pool pavilion. We need some capital to get started, and Xander suggested that since you're getting older and Winter's family law will need new leadership soon anyway, maybe you'd consider selling it to Harrington Capital. We could incorporate it as our legal division. I nearly dropped the phone. Selling my firm? Kendall, I built that practice from nothing. I'm not ready to retire. But Mom, you're 61, she replied, as if my age alone rendered me obsolete. Most people your age are already retired and traveling the world or something. This way you'd still be involved, just not having to work so hard. Xander says, I don't care what Xander says, I interrupted, immediately regretting my sharp tone. Winter's family law is not for sale. Not now, maybe not ever. There was a long pause before Kendall responded, her voice notably cooler. Xander thought you might be difficult about this. He says you've always been stubborn about accepting help. Help? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Kendall, this isn't help. This is Xander trying to acquire a successful business at what I'm guessing would be a fraction of its market value. You always do this, she sighed. You always think people are trying to take advantage of you. Xander has been nothing but generous, offering you a place in his company when most people your age would be put out to pasture. Her words stung like a physical slap. Put out to pasture? Is that how you see me? As some old cow that's outlived its usefulness? That's not what I meant, and you know it, she replied defensively. Look, just think about it, okay? This could be good for everyone. After we hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, staring at the walls covered with awards, certifications, and photos documenting decades of hard work. For the first time, I wondered if Kendall had ever truly seen me, not just as her provider or safety net, but as a woman with dreams and accomplishments of her own. 2 weeks later, I received a formal offer letter from Harrington Capital proposing to acquire Winter's family law for $1.8 million, approximately 1/3 of its actual value. I declined politely but firmly. This triggered a barrage of calls from both Kendall and Xander, each more pressuring than the last. When I remained unmoved, the calls stopped altogether. By October, I hadn't heard from either of them in over a month, the longest we'd ever gone without speaking. Then, surprisingly, I received a text from Kendall inviting me to Thanksgiving dinner. The whole family will be there, she wrote. Xander's parents, his sister Harriet and her husband Douglas, some close friends from the firm. It would mean a lot if you came. I was overjoyed at this apparent olive branch and accepted immediately. Perhaps they'd reconsidered their approach. Perhaps we could move past this unfortunate episode and be a family again. How wrong I was. When Thanksgiving Day arrived, I dressed carefully in a burgundy cashmere sweater dress I'd bought specially. For the occasion, I prepared my signature cranberry orange relish, Kendall's favorite since childhood, and drove to their sprawling Tudor mansion in Oakwood Heights. I was nervous but hopeful as I rang the doorbell, the glass dish of relish still warm in my hands, Kendall answered, air-kissing my cheek and taking the dish with a distracted, "Thanks." Something seemed off immediately. The house was filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation, the aroma of turkey and spices wafting from the kitchen. "Everyone's already here," she said, leading me not toward the formal dining room, but toward the back of the house. "Xander thought it might be best if you ate in the garage apartment." I stopped in my tracks. The garage apartment? But you said this was a family dinner. Kendall looked uncomfortable, glancing back toward the dining room. It is? But Xander? Invited some important investors at the last minute. The dining room is at capacity, and you know how small our table is. I'd been in their dining room. Their small table could comfortably seat 20 people. The investors are very traditional, she continued hurriedly. They might not understand why the CEO's mother-in-law is at a business dinner. It could seem unprofessional. I stood there, purse clutched in my suddenly trembling hands as the truth dawned on me. This wasn't a reconciliation. This was a further humiliation. They'd invited me not to include me, but to put me firmly in what they considered my place, out of sight, separated from the important people. "The garage apartment isn't finished," I said quietly. "You told me construction was still underway." Kendall shifted uncomfortably. "Well, yes, but the space is cleared out enough. There's a folding table set up, and Xander had the staff make you a plate. It's very private. You'll be comfortable." Before I could respond, Xander appeared, all smiles and false warmth. "Gloria, glad you could make it. Look, slight change of plans. We have some VIPs here tonight. Potential investors for our new downtown project. Very exclusive opportunity." He lowered his voice conspiratorially. "Between us, if this deal goes through, Harrington Capital will double in value overnight." I looked into his eyes, cold and calculating despite the smile, and suddenly understood with perfect clarity. This dinner wasn't about Thanksgiving at all. It was a business meeting disguised as a holiday gathering, and I was an inconvenient, loose end to be tucked away. "We've set up a nice little spot for you in the garage," Xander continued smoothly. "Very quiet. You can watch your shows on your phone and eat in peace. No noisy conversations to deal with." He smiled as if he'd just offered me a great gift. I've faced many difficult moments in my life. My husband walking out, near bankruptcy in the early days of my practice, Kendall's teenage rebellions, but nothing had prepared me for the sheer humiliation of that moment. My own daughter was banishing me to eat alone in a garage while she and her husband entertained important people on a holiday meant for family. For a moment, I considered leaving. I could walk out the door with what remained of my dignity and never look back. But something kept me rooted to the spot. Perhaps shock. Perhaps a morbid curiosity to see just how far they would take this charade. "Fine," I said quietly. "Show me to the garage." Xander looked relieved, clearly having expected more resistance. He led me through the laundry room and out a side door into the attached 3-car garage. One bay had been partially cleared with a metal folding table and a single chair set up next to some storage shelves. A small space heater hummed ineffectively against the November chill. "Maggie will be right out with your food," he said, already backing toward the door. "The Wi-Fi password is on that sticky note if you want to stream something." And with that, he was gone, the door closing firmly behind him. I stood alone in the cavernous garage, surrounded by gardening equipment, sports gear, and boxes. Through the wall, I could faintly hear the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses. The contrast between the warmth and celebration just feet away and my cold makeshift dining spot was so stark, it was almost comical. 20 minutes later, a flustered-looking housekeeper appeared with a plate of food: turkey, mashed potatoes, and green beans, all lukewarm and hastily arranged. She couldn't meet my eyes as she set it down on the metal table. "Mrs. Winters, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "This isn't right. I tried to tell them—" "It's not your fault, Maggie," I assured her, recognizing her from previous visits. "Thank you for bringing this out." She hesitated, then quickly pulled a dinner roll wrapped in a napkin from her pocket. "I saved this for you. The good ones with the butter inside. They're almost gone in there." The small act of kindness nearly undid me. I thanked her, and she hurried back inside, clearly afraid of being caught showing me compassion. I sat down at the wobbly folding table and stared at my cooling Thanksgiving dinner. 38 years of sacrifice had led to this moment. I'd given everything to provide Kendall with opportunities, security, love, and in return, I was deemed unworthy of a seat at her table. I picked up my fork, then set it down again without taking a bite. The garage was cold despite the space heater, and the distant sounds of celebration only emphasized my isolation. I pulled my phone from my purse, thinking I might distract myself with a video as Xander had so generously suggested, when an email notification appeared on my screen. It was from Tobias Clark, my firm's senior paralegal. Subject, urgent, Harrington property discovery. The message was brief. Gloria. While organizing the archived loan documents as requested, I discovered something you need to see immediately. The Bradford Heights property, current Harrington residence, still has you listed as the mortgage holder through your private LLC, Winters Holdings. The $1.2 million loan you provided for their down payment 3 years ago was never refinanced as they claimed. According to these documents, they've missed the last 4 payments. You have legal grounds for immediate foreclosure. Call me ASAP. Tobias' eyes stared at the screen. My dinner forgotten. 3 years ago, when Kendall and Xander had purchased their showcase mansion, they'd been caught short on the down payment due to unexpected complications with another investment. Rather than lose their dream home, they'd come to me for help. I'd set up a short-term loan through my personal LLC with the understanding that they would refinance within 6 months and pay me back in full. Xander had assured me a year later that they'd completed the refinancing. He'd even sent what appeared to be confirmation documents, which apparently had been falsified. All this time, I'd remained the actual mortgage holder through my LLC, a fact I'd completely forgotten amid my busy practice and their deliberate deception. And now they'd missed 4 payments, likely diverting that money to fund their lavish lifestyle, while the company was supposedly practicing financial restraint. According to the loan terms, this constituted default, giving me the right to foreclose immediately. In that cold garage, sitting at a folding table with a plate of cooling food, something shifted inside me. The hurt and humiliation didn't disappear, but they were joined by something else, a calm, clear certainty about what needed to happen next. I stood up, leaving my untouched dinner on the table. I took one last look around the garage at the luxury cars parked in the other bays, the expensive golf clubs, the high-end mountain bikes, all symbols of the prosperity that my legal rescue had helped make possible. Then I walked out through the side door into the crisp November air, got into my car, and drove away without looking back. As I pulled out of their driveway, I called Tobias. Despite the holiday, he answered immediately. Gloria, I'm sorry to disturb. Your Thanksgiving? But I thought you should know right away. I'm on my way to the office now, I interrupted, a new resolve strengthening my voice. Pull every document related to the Harrington property. I want the foreclosure paperwork ready to file first thing tomorrow morning. Tomorrow? That's Black Friday. The courts will have a skeleton staff, which is perfect. Less attention. And Tobias? I want this done quickly and quietly. No courtesy calls, no warnings. There was a pause on the line. Tobias had been with me for 15 years. He knew me as fair, even generous. Not someone who would initiate foreclosure proceedings without warning, especially against family. Gloria, are you sure? This is Kendall's home we're talking about. I'm absolutely certain, I replied, my voice steady despite the emotion churning inside me. And Tobias, I need you to prepare documentation for a restraining order as well. I have reason to believe they may become confrontational when they receive the notice. I could almost hear him connecting the dots. Did something happen at Thanksgiving? I'll explain everything when I get there. Have the files ready. 40 minutes later, I sat in my office with Tobias, reviewing the mortgage documents by the light of a single desk lamp. The office building was deserted, everyone else celebrating the holiday with their families. The irony wasn't lost on me. They've been lying for years, Tobias said, shaking his head as he organized the payment records. According to these bank transfers, they made the first 8 payments, then simply stopped. They diverted $18,400 in mortgage payments. To what, I wonder? New furniture, luxury cars, designer clothes, I said flatly. All while Xander preached financial conservatism to his company employees. Tobias hesitated. Gloria, as your paralegal and friend, I have to ask, are you absolutely sure you want to do this? Foreclosure is a drastic step, especially with no warning. I looked up at him, this loyal colleague who had stood beside me through countless legal battles. Was I given any warning before being sent to eat in a garage like an unwanted pet? Did they warn me before attempting to seize my firm for pennies on the dollar? Understanding dawned in his eyes. They made you eat in the garage on Thanksgiving. Nodded, the humiliation still fresh. A metal folding table beside lawn equipment, while they entertained important investors just on the other side of the wall. Tobias's expression hardened. I'll have the foreclosure documents ready to file at 8 a.m. sharp. The court clerk owes me a favor. I'll make sure it gets prioritized. And Tobias? I want this done under Winters Holdings LLC, not my personal name. Let them discover who's foreclosing on them when they receive the official notice. He nodded, already typing efficiently. It'll be completely legal and airtight. They won't have grounds to contest it. We worked through the night, preparing every document with meticulous care. As a specialist in high-conflict divorces, I was familiar with the technical aspects of property seizures. By dawn, we had assembled an ironclad case for immediate foreclosure based on loan default, complete with the necessary affidavits and exhibits. At 7:30 a.m. on Black Friday, while most people were either sleeping off their Thanksgiving dinner or fighting crowds at sales events, Tobias and I stood outside the county courthouse. We were the first in line when the doors opened at 8:01 a.m. The filing went smoothly. The clerk on duty, recognizing Tobias, expedited the processing. By 9:15 a.m., the foreclosure action was officially filed, and a hearing date had been set for the following Tuesday. Remarkably fast, but not unusual for clear-cut cases of default, where the required documentation was impeccable. As we walked back to the office, Tobias asked the question that had likely been on his mind all night. What happens when they find out? When they realize you're the one foreclosing on them? I paused on the sidewalk, watching early Christmas shoppers hurry past, oblivious to the life-altering legal maneuver I'd just initiated. They'll be angry. They'll feel betrayed. They'll call it vindictive and unfair. And is it? He asked quietly. Vindictive, I mean. I considered the question carefully. No, its consequences. For years of deception, disrespect, and financial misconduct. They breached not just the loan agreement, but every standard of basic human decency. Back at the office, I found myself unable to leave. Though the filing was complete, something kept me at my desk, reviewing other cases, catching up on correspondence, anything to avoid returning to my empty house and the memories of holidays past, when Kendall and I had been a team against the world. Around 2 p.m., my cell phone rang. It was Kendall. For a moment, I considered not answering, but curiosity won out. Had they somehow already discovered the foreclosure filing? That seemed unlikely. Court notices wouldn't be generated until Monday at the earliest. Hello, Kendall, I answered, keeping my voice neutral. Mom? Where did you go yesterday? Maggie said you just disappeared. Her tone wasn't concerned so much as annoyed. I left, I replied simply. The garage was cold, and I didn't feel particularly welcome. She sighed heavily. You're being dramatic. It was just a practical arrangement because of the investors. Xander said you seemed fine with it. Did he? I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. And did he also mention that you've missed the last 4 mortgage payments on your house? The mortgage that I hold through Winters Holdings? There was a moment of stunned silence. What are you talking about? We refinanced that loan years ago. Xander showed you the papers. Apparently not. According to my records, which I spent all night reviewing, I still hold the mortgage. And you're in default. Another long pause. When Kendall spoke again, her voice had changed, uncertainty creeping in. There must be some mistake. Xander handled all of that. Let me talk to him and call you back. That won't be necessary, I interrupted. I've already filed for foreclosure. The hearing is Tuesday morning. You what? She nearly screamed. "Mom, this is our home. You can't be serious. This is because of yesterday? Because of a stupid dinner arrangement? This is because of years of lies, Kendall. Years of disrespect and manipulation. The garage was simply the final straw." "I'm calling Xander right now," she said, panic evident in her voice. "This is insane. You can't do this to us." "It's already done," I replied calmly. "And Kendall? Don't bother sending Xander to intimidate me. I've also filed for a restraining order against both of you. Any contact needs to go through my attorney." "Your attorney? I'm your daughter." "Yes," I said, a sadness settling over me despite my resolve. "And I deserved better from you." I ended the call as she was still protesting, then immediately switched my phone to silent mode. Within minutes, it began lighting up with incoming calls. Kendall, Xander, even Harriet, Xander's sister. I ignored them all. Tobias appeared in my doorway, concern etched on his face. "From your expression, I'm guessing they know?" "Kendall knows. Xander will know shortly, if he doesn't already." I straightened the papers on my desk with deliberate calm. "We should prepare for them to contest the foreclosure, though they don't have legal grounds. And we should alert building security. They might try to confront me here." "Already done," Tobias assured me. "I've also engaged a private security service for your home, just in case. They'll be in place by 4 p.m. I nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Tobias, for everything." As evening fell, I finally headed home, the weight of the day's events settling around me like a heavy cloak. The foreclosure was in motion. There was no turning back now. In just 4 days, a judge would almost certainly grant my petition, and Kendall and Xander would have 30 days to vacate the property. The magnitude of what I'd done, essentially rendering my only child homeless, wasn't lost on me. Yet alongside the inevitable guilt was a surprising sense of peace. For the first time in decades, I had refused to be devalued, refused to accept less than basic dignity. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked across the street, the security service Tobias had arranged. I waved slightly in acknowledgement, then entered my modest but comfortable home, the one I'd kept despite Kendall and Xander's repeated suggestions that I downsize to something more appropriate for a woman my age. Inside, I poured myself a small glass of brandy and settled into my favorite reading chair. My phone, which I'd finally unmuted, showed 27 missed calls and 16 text messages. I ignored them all, instead opening my laptop to check my email. Among the usual correspondence was a message from Harriet, Xander's sister. Subject: "Please reconsider, Gloria. Xander just told us what you've done. While I understand you might be upset about Thanksgiving, this seems like an extreme reaction. Kendall is devastated. Please call off this foreclosure. This is your daughter's home. Whatever disagreement you have can surely be resolved without such drastic measures. Harriet Harrington." I closed the email without responding. Harriet had been at that Thanksgiving table while I sat in the garage. She had said nothing, done nothing. Her concern now rang hollow. As I sat in the growing darkness, sipping my brandy, I wondered what tomorrow would bring. The battle lines had been drawn. The peaceful holiday season I'd hoped for had transformed into something else entirely. A reckoning long overdue. Saturday morning arrived with a pounding at my front door that startled me awake. I glanced at the bedside clock, 7:18 a.m. Through my bedroom window, I could see the security officer approaching the visitor from his parked car, intercepting them before they could knock again. I dressed quickly and made my way downstairs. Through the peephole, I saw Xander engaged in a heated exchange with the security officer. His normally perfect appearance was disheveled, wrinkled clothes, uncombed hair, his face flushed with anger. "Ms. Winters has instructed us not to allow any unscheduled visitors," the security officer was saying calmly. "I'll have to ask you to leave the property." "This is ridiculous," Xander shouted. She's my mother-in-law. Tell her to come out and face me instead of hiding behind hired muscle. I opened the door but remained behind the security officer. I'm not hiding, Xander. I'm protecting myself from what I anticipate will be an unpleasant confrontation. His eyes locked onto mine, cold fury evident in his gaze. What the hell do you think you're doing? Filing for foreclosure? A restraining order? Have you completely lost your mind? I'm enforcing the terms of a loan agreement that you've been in default on for months, I replied evenly, something you lied about repeatedly. This is about yesterday, isn't it? About the garage? For God's sake, Gloria, it was a business dinner. We needed the space. Your 20-person dining table couldn't accommodate one more elderly woman? I asked, unable to keep the bitterness from my tone. Or was I simply an embarrassment you needed to hide away? He ran his hand through his hair in exasperation. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. We'll make the missed payments. We'll refinance for real this time. Just withdraw the foreclosure. The time for negotiations was before you made me eat in a garage on Thanksgiving, before you tried to seize my firm for a fraction of its value, before you spent years treating me as disposable. His facade of reasonableness cracked. You vindictive old witch. You think you can take our home because your feelings got hurt? Kendall is devastated. She was up all night crying. Perhaps she should have considered my feelings before relegating me to the garage like an unwanted pet, I said, surprised by my own steadiness. And perhaps you should have made your mortgage payments instead of buying another luxury car. His face darkened. You won't get away with this. I have connections in this town you can't imagine. By the time I'm done, your precious law firm will be worthless. Are you threatening me, Xander? Because that would violate the restraining order. The security officer stepped forward slightly. Sir, I need to ask you to leave now, or I'll have to report this as a violation. Xander's gaze shifted between us, calculation replacing raw anger. This isn't over, Gloria. Not by a long shot. He turned and stalked back to his car, the new Mercedes he'd purchased while claiming financial prudence, and sped away with a screech of tires. I thanked the security officer, who promised to document the encounter in case we needed it for the restraining order hearing. Back inside, I made coffee with hands that were surprisingly steady given the confrontation. My phone rang. Kendall. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. Mom, she began, her voice raw from crying. Please don't do this. Please. We can work something out. We'll pay back the missed payments. We'll make things right. Kendall, I said softly, this isn't just about money. This is about years of disrespect culminating in that garage dinner. You made your choice when you allowed Xander to treat me that way. I didn't know what else to do, she cried. Xander insisted. The investors were important. More important than your mother's dignity? More important than basic human decency? She had no immediate answer. You could have stood up for me, I continued. You could have said, no, my mother will sit at our table or we'll cancel dinner. You could have shown even a fraction of the loyalty I've shown you your entire life. So, this is punishment? She asked, her tone hardening slightly. Taking our home because I didn't defy my husband? This is consequences, Kendall. For both of you. For the financial deception, for the attempted theft of my firm, for years of treating me as if I were nothing more than an inconvenient obligation. What do you want from me? She asked, desperation creeping back into her voice. What can I do to fix this? I paused, considering her question seriously. What did I want? Revenge? Justice? Reconciliation? The answer surprised even me. I want you to understand what you've done, I said finally. Not just to me, but to yourself. You've become someone I don't recognize. Someone who would watch her mother eat holiday dinner in a garage and think that's acceptable. Someone who values appearances over substance, status over integrity. And taking our home teaches me that? She asked bitterly. Perhaps not. But it enforces boundaries I should have established long ago. The hearing is Tuesday. I suggest you and Xander start packing and looking for alternate accommodations. I ended the call, set down my phone, and gazed out the kitchen window at my modest, well-tended garden. The forecast promised snow later, the first of the season. Somewhere across town, in their sprawling Tudor mansion, my daughter and son-in-law were facing a very different forecast: the imminent loss of everything they'd taken for granted. The thought brought me no joy, only a somber certainty that this reckoning had been inevitable and necessary. Sunday passed in strange suspension. I attended my regular morning yoga class, picked up groceries, reviewed files for Monday's cases, outwardly normal activities that felt surreal against the backdrop of what was unfolding. My phone remained mostly silent. After Xander's confrontation and Kendall's pleading call, they seemed to have adopted a new strategy. I discovered what that strategy was when I arrived at the office Monday morning. Tobias met me at the reception. Area, concern etched on his face. "Gloria, Henry Harrington is waiting in your office. He arrived 20 minutes ago, insisted on seeing you." Henry Harrington, Xander's father, still recovering from his stroke, had rarely left his assisted living facility since being discharged from the hospital. That he had come here personally signaled the seriousness with which the family was taking the foreclosure. "Thank you, Tobias. Hold my calls, please." I found Henry seated in one of my client chairs, looking diminished from the powerful figure he'd once been. His left side showed the lingering effects of the stroke. A slight droop to his mouth, his left hand curled uselessly in his lap. But his eyes remained sharp, assessing me as I entered. "Gloria," he greeted me, his speech slightly slurred but intelligible. "We need to talk." I took my seat behind my desk, establishing the professional dynamic immediately. "Henry, this is unexpected. You're foreclosing on my son's house. No preamble, straight to business. One of the things I'd always respected about Henry. I'm enforcing the terms of a loan that's been in default for 4 months, I corrected gently. He nodded slowly. The loan, they told me, had been refinanced through Harrington Capital's partner bank. Another of Xander's lies, apparently. Henry sighed heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 74 years. Xander says this is retaliation for making you eat in the garage at Thanksgiving. Is that true? I considered my answer carefully. That incident was the culmination of years of disrespect and manipulation, Henry. The garage dinner merely revealed the truth I'd been avoiding, that my daughter and son-in-law view me as disposable. And taking their home is your response? He asked, not accusatory but genuinely curious. Enforcing a legitimate loan agreement that they've defaulted on is my response. The timing is, admittedly, influenced by recent events. Henry was quiet for a moment, his good hand tapping thoughtfully on the armrest. You know, I always liked you, Gloria. You reminded me of myself. Self-made, principled, willing to work twice as hard as everyone else. I was disappointed when Xander and Kendall began treating you differently after I fell ill. His awareness surprised me. You noticed? From my assisted living facility, I notice everything, he said with a hint of his old dry humor. The Sunday dinners that stopped. The way they spoke about you when they thought I wasn't listening. The attempt to acquire your firm. You knew about that too? He nodded. Xander mentioned it to the board as a potential expansion. I advised against it, told him your firm was worth twice what he was offering, and that you were too smart to accept. Such an insulting proposal. He didn't listen. I felt an unexpected kinship with this man who had watched his son's moral compass deteriorate from the sidelines. What exactly are you here for, Henry? He leaned forward slightly. I'm here to offer a compromise. Withdraw the foreclosure. In exchange, I'll personally guarantee full repayment of the loan with appropriate interest within 30 days. I'll also ensure that Xander steps down as CEO of Harrington Capital, replaced by our COO, Maggie Thornton. The offer was generous, addressing both the financial and accountability aspects. Yet something felt incomplete. And what about the fundamental issue, Henry? The disrespect? The manipulation? The garage dinner was merely a symptom of a deeper problem. Henry nodded slowly. I can't fix their character defects, Gloria. But I can ensure there are consequences for Xander professionally. He's been making questionable decisions at the firm as well, decisions I've been too weak to challenge until now. I studied the man before me, once intimidating in his power, now physically diminished but showing more moral clarity than his son had ever demonstrated. I appreciate the offer, Henry. But I'm proceeding with the foreclosure hearing tomorrow. His expression remained calm, almost as if he'd expected this answer. May I ask why? My offer addresses the financial injury. Because some lessons can only be learned through significant loss, I replied. For too long, Kendall and Xander have operated as if actions have no consequences, as if people can be used and discarded without repercussion. That ends now. Henry regarded me for a long moment, then nodded slightly. I understand. He struggled to rise, waving away my instinctive offer of assistance. For what it's worth, I believe you're doing the right thing. Painful, but necessary. As I watched him make his laborious way to the door, he paused and turned back. One more thing, Gloria. Whatever happens with the house, with Kendall and Xander, I hope you'll continue to visit me occasionally. Our conversations were always the highlight of family gatherings. The simple human connection in his request caught me off guard. I'd like that, Henry. After he left, I sat alone in my office, contemplating the weight of what would happen tomorrow. The foreclosure hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. Given the clear documentation and unambiguous default, it would likely be granted without complication. Within 24 hours, Kendall and Xander would legally have 30 days to vacate the property. I had set these consequences in motion, and despite the inevitable guilt, I remained certain of my course. Some boundaries, once crossed, required decisive action to reestablish. Some lessons could only be taught through loss. As evening fell, I gathered the final documents for tomorrow's hearing. My phone rang, Kendall again. This time, I let it go to voicemail. Whatever pleas or accusations she had, they could wait until after the hearing. The time for words had passed. Now would come the consequences. Tuesday morning dawned clear and cold, with the season's first dusting of snow transforming Riverbrook into a winter postcard. I dressed with particular care, a charcoal gray suit, pearl earrings, and the sapphire, brooch that had been my grandmother's. There's something about facing a difficult day that demands armor, even if it's only psychological. Tobias arrived at 8:15 to drive us to the courthouse. Are you absolutely certain about this? He asked, as we navigated the light morning traffic. It's not too late to accept Henry's offer. I'm certain, I replied, watching the familiar streets pass by. Some boundaries must be absolute. The courthouse was relatively quiet when we arrived, a typical Tuesday morning in the civil division. We made our way to courtroom 3, where Judge Rebecca Martinez would be hearing our case along with other property matters. What I hadn't expected was to find Kendall sitting alone on a bench outside the courtroom. No lawyer beside her, no Xander in sight. She looked up as we approached, her eyes red-rimmed from crying, her normally perfect appearance noticeably disheveled. Mom, she said, rising uncertainly. I nodded in acknowledgement, but maintained my professional demeanor. Kendall, where's Xander? And your attorney? A flash of something. Anger? Shame? Crossed her face. Xander's not coming. He said there's no point since the documentation is clear. As for a lawyer, we couldn't. That is. She stopped, obviously embarrassed. Tobias tactfully stepped away to give us privacy, moving to check the docket posting by the courtroom door. You couldn't afford one? I finished for her, surprised. Given their lifestyle, legal representation should have been easily within reach. Kendall looked down at her hands. There's something you should know before we go in there. Something I just found out myself. She reached into her purse and withdrew a folded document, handing it to me with trembling fingers. I found this last night in Xander's home office while looking for our mortgage papers. I unfolded the document, a bank statement from an offshore account in the Cayman Islands under the name Harrington Exclusive Holdings. The balance, $4.3 million. Keep reading, Kendall said quietly. I flipped through the pages, noting regular deposits over the past 3 years, many coinciding with major transactions at Harrington Capital. The final page showed a transfer request dated yesterday, the entire balance to be moved to another account in Switzerland. He's been siphoning money from the company, I said, the implications immediately clear. And now he's planning to move it beyond reach. Kendall nodded, tears welling in her eyes. That's why we couldn't pay the mortgage. It wasn't going to renovations or investments like he told me. He was hiding it offshore. Her voice broke slightly. When I confronted him last night, he said it was insurance, in case his father tried to reclaim control of the company. He's been stealing from his own father. I studied my daughter's face, seeing genuine shock and betrayal. And where is Xander? Now? I don't know. We had a terrible fight after I found this. He stormed out around midnight and didn't come home. He's not answering his phone. She hesitated, then added, I think he might be planning to leave the country. There was a packed suitcase in his car. The implications were staggering. Xander wasn't just defaulting on our loan. He was likely embezzling from Harrington Capital, preparing to flee with millions while leaving his wife, his father, and the company to deal with the aftermath. Does Henry know about this? I asked. Kendall shook her head. I tried calling the facility this morning, but they said he's at a medical appointment. I left a message, but she trailed off, looking lost. Tobias returned, indicating that the courtroom was opening. As we prepared to enter, Kendall touched my arm hesitantly. Mom, I know it's too late to stop the foreclosure. I know I don't deserve your help after how I've treated you, but I don't know what to do about this. She gestured to the bank statements. This isn't just about our home anymore. This is fraud on a massive scale. I felt a complex mix of emotions, vindication that my instincts about Xander had been correct, concern for Henry and the company he'd built, and, despite everything, a protective instinct toward my daughter who was clearly being abandoned by her deceitful husband. We need to focus on one legal matter at a time, I said, keeping my voice low as other people filed into the courtroom. After the foreclosure hearing, we'll address this evidence. It needs to go to the authorities immediately. Judge Martinez's courtroom was modestly filled, mostly attorneys and their clients waiting for their cases to be called. We took seats in the front row, Kendall sitting apart from us but within speaking distance. As we waited, my phone vibrated with a text message from an unknown number. Gloria, it's Henry. Emergency. Xander attempting to transfer $4.3 million from offshore account. Need your legal help to freeze assets. Call me immediately after your hearing. I showed the message to Tobias, whose eyebrows rose in surprise. He already knows, he whispered. Someone at the bank must have alerted him. Before I could respond, the bailiff called the court to order as Judge Martinez entered. After addressing several standard motions, she called our case. Winters Holdings, LLC versus Harrington, foreclosure proceeding. Counsel, please approach. Tobias and I moved to the plaintiff's table. Kendall, after a moment's hesitation, took her place at the defense table, alone and clearly uncomfortable. Judge Martinez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s with a reputation for efficiency, reviewed the filed documents. I see the plaintiff is seeking foreclosure based on a default of 4 months' payments on a private mortgage. Is the defendant contesting this action? Kendall stood, her voice barely audible. No, Your Honor. We acknowledge the default. The judge looked up, surprised by the lack of defense counsel. Ms. Harrington, are you representing yourself in this matter? Yes, Your Honor. And you're not contesting the foreclosure? No, Your Honor. The documentation is accurate. We failed to make the payments as required. Judge Martinez nodded, making a notation in her file. In that case, given the uncontested nature and clear documentation, I'm granting the foreclosure petition. The defendants will have 30 days to vacate the property. She signed the order with a practiced motion. Next case. Just like that, it was done. In less than 5 minutes, the foreclosure I had initiated on Black Friday was complete, legally, binding, and uncontested. Kendall would lose her home, as I had intended since that humiliating Thanksgiving dinner in the garage. Yet as we gathered our materials to leave, I felt no triumph, only a grim certainty that this was merely the beginning of a much larger storm about to break over the Harrington family. In the courthouse hallway, Kendall stood apart, looking lost as the reality of the foreclosure settled over her. Despite everything, I felt a twinge of concern for my daughter, not regret for the foreclosure, which had been necessary and justified, but recognition that she now faced a far greater crisis than losing her home. We need to talk, I said, approaching her. About Xander and those offshore accounts. She nodded numbly. What do I do, Mom? If he's been embezzling from the company? First, we need to contact Henry. Then we need to alert the authorities before Xander can leave the country. I turned to Tobias. File the foreclosure order, then meet us at the office. I'll need you to prepare documentation for an emergency asset freeze. As Tobias departed, I guided Kendall to a quiet alcove and called the number Henry had texted from. He answered immediately. Gloria, thank God. Has the hearing concluded? Yes, foreclosure granted, but we have a more urgent situation. Kendall discovered evidence of Xander's offshore accounts. She's with me now. I know about the accounts, Henry confirmed, his voice grim despite the slight slurring from his stroke. Our compliance officer contacted me this morning. Xander tried to transfer everything to Switzerland, but we managed to place a temporary administrative hold. It won't last long without legal intervention. Where are you now? I asked. At Harrington Capital. Emergency board meeting in progress. Xander hasn't shown up. We're coming there, I decided. Don't take any action until we arrive. We need to coordinate with law enforcement. 20 minutes later, Kendall and I walked into Harrington Capital's gleaming headquarters. The receptionist, recognizing Kendall, directed us immediately to the main conference room where Henry and 6 board members sat around a massive table, expressions grave. Henry looked up as we entered, nodding in acknowledgement. Gloria, Kendall. His gaze lingered on his daughter-in-law, a mixture of sympathy and disappointment evident. I understand you discovered the Cayman account? Kendall nodded, placing the statements on the table. Last night, when I confronted Xander, he essentially admitted it was money diverted from company transactions. One of the board members, Douglas Foster, if I recalled correctly, leaned forward. Ms. Winters, we understand you're a family law attorney, not a criminal prosecutor, but given the circumstances, I've handled numerous cases involving hidden assets and financial fraud. I clarified. And I've already instructed my paralegal to prepare for an emergency asset freeze. But we need to involve the FBI immediately. This crosses state lines and international boundaries. Already done, Henry said. Special Agent Harriet Chen is on her way. The question is how we proceed from here, both legally and... He glanced at Kendall as a family. I assessed the situation clinically, setting aside the personal aspects to focus on the legal strategy. We need 3 parallel actions. First, an emergency injunction freezing all accounts connected to Xander, both domestic and international. Second, formal criminal charges for wire fraud and embezzlement to trigger law enforcement resources for locating him. Third, protective measures for Harrington Capital to maintain client confidence and prevent market panic. The board members exchanged impressed glances. Douglas nodded appreciatively. Precise and comprehensive. Exactly what we need. What about me? Kendall asked quietly. What do I do now? I've lost my home, and my husband is apparently a criminal about to flee the country. Before I could respond, Henry spoke up. The guest house at my facility is available immediately. It's small but comfortable. 2 bedrooms, fully furnished. You're welcome to stay there while you figure out your next steps. I was surprised by Henry's offer, given that I'd just foreclosed on his son's home. He caught my expression and added, This situation has moved beyond property disputes, Gloria. We're dealing with criminal activity that affects all of us. He was right. What had begun as my response to a personal humiliation had uncovered something far larger. Systematic fraud that threatened not just Xander and Kendall, but Henry's legacy and the livelihoods of everyone at Harrington Capital. The door opened, and Tobias entered with a slim Asian woman who introduced herself as Special Agent Chen. We need to move quickly, she said after preliminary introductions. We have information that Xander Harrington booked a private flight to Zurich departing at 3:45 p.m. from Riverbrook Executive Airport. I checked my watch, 1:22 p.m., just over 2 hours. Do you have enough for an arrest warrant? I asked. Agent. Chen nodded. Based on the offshore documentation and the attempted transfer, yes. I've already requested one from the U.S. Attorney's Office. It should be issued within the hour. Then we need to delay that flight, Henry said firmly. I still have some influence at the airport. As the room erupted into coordinated activity, phone calls, document preparation, strategy discussions, I found myself in the unexpected position of central coordinator. My expertise in tracking hidden assets in divorce cases proved surprisingly applicable to this larger financial fraud. Within 30 minutes, we had a comprehensive plan in place. Tobias would file for the emergency asset freeze with Judge Martinez, who was still in session and could sign the order immediately. Agent Chen would coordinate with local police to intercept Xander at the airport once the arrest warrant came through. The Harrington Capital Board would issue a carefully worded statement announcing Xander's leave of absence pending an internal financial review, avoiding market panic while the investigation proceeded. Throughout this flurry of activity, Kendall sat quietly, watching the dismantling of her life with a stunned expression. Despite everything that had transpired between us, I felt a familiar protective instinct stir. She had been complicit in my humiliation, yes, but she was also a victim of Xander's more extensive deception. As the meeting broke up, each person departing with clear assignments, I approached my daughter. Kendall, go with Henry to get settled. In the guest house. Pack essentials from the main house first. You have 30 days before the foreclosure requires complete vacancy, but given the circumstances, it's better to secure your personal items now. She looked up, vulnerability evident in her expression. Will you come with me? To the house? I don't want to go alone in case Xander shows up. After a moment's hesitation, I nodded. I'll come with you. But first, I need to review the asset freeze documentation with Tobias. As she went to speak with Henry about logistics, Tobias approached me with a questioning look. Are you sure about this, Gloria? Getting involved beyond the foreclosure? I considered his concern. This isn't what I expected when I filed for foreclosure. Tobias. I wanted consequences for their treatment of me, particularly that Thanksgiving dinner. But this... I gestured to the evidence of Xander's fraud spread across the conference table. This is different. This requires a different response. He nodded thoughtfully. From personal justice to something larger. Exactly. The foreclosure stands, that consequence remains necessary. But abandoning Kendall now, when she's facing the collapse of her entire life. I shook my head. I can maintain boundaries without abandoning basic decency. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was extending to Kendall precisely the dignity and respect that she and Xander had denied me at Thanksgiving. Perhaps that was the most powerful response of all. The next few hours unfolded with the precision of a military operation. Judge Martinez signed the emergency asset freeze, immediately locking down not only the Cayman account, but all financial assets in Xander's name. Tobias filed the documents with remarkable efficiency, ensuring there would be no legal loopholes. Meanwhile, I accompanied Kendall to the Tudor mansion, now legally mine through foreclosure, to collect her essential belongings. The house felt different now, its grandeur hollowed by the knowledge of how it had been maintained. As Kendall moved through the rooms, selecting clothing, jewelry, and personal mementos, her movements had a mechanical quality, as if she were operating on autopilot. "He never loved me, did he?" she asked suddenly, standing in the massive walk-in closet where her designer clothes hung in perfect order. I was just part of the image he wanted to project. I considered my answer carefully. "I think Xander loves the idea of you, the perfect corporate wife, the social status you represent. Whether he loves you as a person." I left the sentence unfinished. She nodded, accepting this harsh assessment without protest. "I keep thinking about Thanksgiving," she said, selecting a photo album from a shelf. "About making you eat in the garage. I knew it was wrong, but I was so afraid of disappointing Xander, of disrupting his business dinner." "Why?" I asked, genuinely curious. "What were you afraid would happen if you stood up to him?" She paused, considering the question as if for the first time. That he would look at me the way he looked at people he considered beneath him. That I would become disposable. Her voice broke on the last word as realization dawned. "Just like I let him treat you." Before I could respond, my phone rang. Tobias. "The arrest warrant came through," he reported without preamble. "Local police are coordinating with airport security now. But there's a complication. Xander's plane filed a new flight plan advancing departure to 2:30. They're rushing to intercept before takeoff." I checked my watch, 2:17 p.m. "Keep me posted," I said tersely, then turned to Kendall. "We need to finish quickly. The situation with Xander is accelerating." She nodded, hastening her pace as she gathered her most important possessions. We loaded her car with several suitcases and boxes, then did a final sweep of the house to ensure nothing critical was forgotten. As we prepared to leave, Kendall paused in the entryway, looking back at the grand staircase with its custom wrought iron railing. "I thought this house was everything I ever wanted," she said quietly. "Now it just feels like a beautiful prison." "Houses are just structures," I replied. "It's the people inside them that matter." She turned to me, eyes glistening. "I'm sorry, Mom, for everything, for forgetting that." Before I could respond, my phone rang again. Agent Chen this time. "Ms. Winters, we have a situation." Officers arrived at the airport, but Xander's plane departed 10 minutes ahead of the revised schedule. It's airborne now, headed for Canada, with intended continuation to Switzerland. My heart sank. "Can't you contact Canadian authorities? Force it to land?" "We're working on that now," she replied, professional but clearly frustrated. "But these private flights can move quickly, and international coordination takes time. I wanted you to know. This just became more complicated." As I ended the call and relayed the news to Kendall, I saw resignation settle over her features. The consequences I had set in motion with the foreclosure were unfolding in ways I never could have anticipated. Xander was attempting to escape not just financial responsibility, but criminal liability. What had begun as my response to a personal humiliation had evolved into something far more complex, a reckoning that would affect dozens of lives beyond just Kendall and Xander's. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of legal maneuvers, law enforcement updates, and family crisis management. Kendall settled into Henry's guest house, a modest two-bedroom cottage that stood in stark contrast to the mansion she'd just vacated. I found myself dividing my time between my law practice, consulting with the FBI on Xander's financial fraud, and surprisingly, providing emotional support to my daughter. Late Thursday afternoon, we received the news we'd been anticipating. Canadian. Authorities had detained Xander when his plane stopped to refuel in Quebec. He was being held pending extradition back to the United States on charges of wire fraud, embezzlement, and flight to avoid prosecution. The board of Harrington Capital called an emergency meeting, which I attended at Henry's request. The conference room had a distinctly different energy than our previous gathering. Less panic, more focused determination. The immediate crisis has been contained, Douglas Foster announced as the meeting began. The asset freeze is holding, and Xander's detention prevents further flight risk. However, we now face significant challenges on multiple fronts. Those challenges were substantial. A preliminary audit had revealed that Xander's embezzlement extended far beyond the Cayman account, with tentacles reaching into multiple company transactions over the past 3 years. The total misappropriation was estimated at nearly $7.8 million, funds diverted from client investments, operating capital, and even the company pension plan. We're legally obligated to disclose this to our clients and shareholders, Henry said gravely. The company will survive, but not without significant damage to our reputation and bottom line. As the discussion continued, I found myself increasingly drawn into their planning. My experience with complex asset division provided valuable perspective on how to approach the financial recovery, while my legal expertise helped navigate the disclosure requirements. There's another matter we need to address, Henry said finally, looking directly at me. Gloria, the board would like to engage Winters Family Law officially to handle the civil side of this situation: asset recovery, client compensation planning, and coordination with criminal proceedings. I was momentarily speechless. The same company that had attempted to acquire my firm at a fraction of its value now wanted to hire me at what would undoubtedly be premium rates. That would create a potential conflict of interest, I noted carefully. I'm Kendall's mother, and I've just foreclosed on property connected to your company's CEO, Douglas nodded. We've consulted with outside counsel on this issue. With appropriate disclosures and Kendall's written consent, there's no legal barrier. Frankly, you already understand this situation better than any attorney we could bring. In cold. It was a stunning reversal of fortune. The firm that Xander had dismissed as a small-time operation run by an aging attorney was now being sought for its specialized expertise in exactly the crisis he had created. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Tobias. Turn on Channel 7 News now. Henry noticed my expression change. What is it? I reached for the remote on the conference table and turned on the wall-mounted television. The local news was in the middle of a breaking story. Sources confirm that Xander Harrington, CEO of Harrington Capital, has been detained in Canada following allegations of massive financial fraud. According to court documents just made public, Harrington allegedly embezzled millions from the investment firm founded by his father, Henry Harrington. In a surprising twist, the investigation reportedly began after Harrington's mother-in-law, prominent divorce attorney Gloria Winters, foreclosed on his Oakwood Heights mansion following what sources describe as a family dispute over Thanksgiving dinner. The room fell silent as the reporter continued detailing the connection between my foreclosure action and the subsequent discovery of Xander's fraud. They had somehow obtained information about the Thanksgiving garage incident, describing it as the catalyst that exposed a multi-million-dollar financial crime. I felt all eyes in the room turn to me as the report concluded. What had been a private family matter was now public knowledge, inextricably linked to Harrington Capital's corporate crisis. The foreclosure I had initiated as a response to personal humiliation had inadvertently exposed corporate malfeasance on a massive scale. The boundaries between personal justice and public consequences had completely dissolved. My private reckoning, with Kendall and Xander had become front-page news, transforming me from a wronged mother-in-law into an unlikely whistleblower. 2 weeks after the foreclosure hearing, I sat in the visitors area of the county detention center, waiting for Xander to be brought in. After his extradition from Canada, he had been denied bail due to the flight risk and the severity of the charges against him. Now, at his lawyer's request, I had agreed to this meeting, not out of any sympathy for Xander, but from curiosity about what he could possibly want from me. The door buzzed open, and Xander entered in an orange jumpsuit, a stark contrast to the bespoke suits he'd favored in his corporate life. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by tightly controlled movements and watchful eyes. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by his surroundings. "Gloria," he said as he sat across from me at the metal table. "Thanks for coming." His tone held none of the condescension I'd grown accustomed to. Necessity had forced civility upon him. "What do you want, Xander?" Your attorney was vague about the purpose of this meeting. He glanced at the guard standing by the door, then leaned forward slightly. "I want to make a deal." "I'm not a prosecutor," I reminded him. "Any plea arrangement would go through the U.S. Attorney's office." "Not that kind of deal." He lowered his voice further. "I know you're working with the board on asset recovery. I know you've been hired to handle the civil side of things." News traveled fast, even to detention. "And I can tell you where the rest of the money is." His eyes held mine, calculating even now. "There's another $3.2 million the feds haven't found. Money that could help make Harrington Capital's clients whole." I studied him carefully. "Why tell me? Why not use that as leverage with the prosecutors?" A bitter smile crossed his face. "Because the criminal charges are solid. The money won't change that. But if I help recover funds for the clients, the civil penalties might be reduced. And," he hesitated, "I need someone to look after Kendall." The audacity was breathtaking. "You want me to help Kendall? After you abandoned her? After you stole millions and tried to flee the country? She doesn't deserve to lose everything because of my actions." He had the grace to look slightly ashamed. "The foreclosure took her home. My arrest froze all our accounts. She has nothing left." "She has her father-in-law's guest house," I pointed out coldly. "And she has me, though you did everything possible to destroy that relationship." Xander leaned back, frustration flickering across his features. "Look, I know I can't fix what happened at Thanksgiving. That was inexcusable. Yet you did it without hesitation," I noted. "You sent me to eat in a cold garage like an unwanted pet." "I was protecting a business relationship. Those investors represented a $30 million opportunity. And I represented what? An embarrassment? An inconvenience?" He had no immediate answer, which told me everything. After a moment, he tried a different approach. "What will it take, Gloria? What do you want in exchange for helping Kendall and considering my information about the hidden funds?" I studied the man who had treated me with such casual cruelty, now reduced to bargaining from a position of complete powerlessness. The tables had turned so completely it was almost poetic. "First, a full written admission of how you treated me at Thanksgiving and why. No excuses, no justifications. Second, complete disclosure of all hidden assets with documentation. Third, a formal apology to Kendall for the deception and abandonment." His jaw tightened, pride warring with desperation. "And if I do all that, then I'll ensure that Kendall receives appropriate support during the divorce proceedings that will inevitably follow. And I'll inform the board and prosecutors of your cooperation regarding the hidden assets. That's it? No promises about reduced charges or settlements?" I stood up, gathering my belongings. "You sent me to eat Thanksgiving dinner in a garage, Xander. You tried to steal my firm. You lied to my daughter and abandoned her when things got difficult. Be grateful I'm offering anything at all." As I turned to leave, he called after me. The overseas accounts are documented in a safe deposit box at First Mercantile Bank, Box 447. The key is hidden in my office at home, taped beneath the left desk drawer. I paused, nodding to acknowledge the information without making any promises. As the guard moved to escort Xander back to his cell, I saw something I'd never witnessed before: fear in his eyes, not just of legal consequences, but of the complete dismantling of the privileged, protected world he had always inhabited. The man who had banished me to the garage was now confined to a cell, while I walked free, holding the keys to his future in more ways than one. If there was a clearer example of justice, I couldn't imagine it. 1 year later, I stood on the steps of the courthouse after the final hearing in the Harrington capital case. The December air was crisp, holiday decorations adorning the downtown streets of Riverbrook. Beside me, Henry leaned on his cane, looking tired but satisfied as reporters called questions from the small crowd gathered below. "Mr. Harrington, how does it feel to have the case finally resolved?" Henry stepped forward, his voice stronger than it had been in months. "Justice has been served. Harrington Capital has compensated all affected clients, implemented new oversight measures, and emerged as a stronger, more transparent institution. Though the past year has been challenging, I believe we've honored our commitment to make things right." As the press conference concluded, Kendall approached from where she'd been waiting nearby. The past year had changed her profoundly. Gone were the designer clothes and carefully maintained appearance of a corporate wife. She now dressed simply but professionally, her newly earned real estate license allowing her to support herself for the first time in her adult life. The condo. "Closing is at 3, she reminded Henry. "Are you still sure about this?" He nodded. "Absolutely. It's time I downsized from that facility. The maintenance is more than I need." After the press dispersed, the three of us walked slowly toward the parking lot, an unlikely family unit forged in the aftermath of betrayal and reckoning. Xander had eventually pleaded guilty to reduced charges in exchange for his cooperation in recovering the hidden assets. His admission had indeed led to the discovery of an additional $3.2 million in overseas accounts, significantly aiding the company's ability to make restitution to affected clients. He was currently serving a 7-year sentence at a federal correctional facility, a substantial reduction from what he might have faced without the plea deal, but still a dramatic fall for a man who had once commanded a corner office with a view. The Tudor mansion that had been the site of my garage dinner humiliation had been sold 6 months after the foreclosure, the proceeds used to establish a victims' compensation fund for Harrington Capital's smaller investors. I had insisted on this arrangement, turning personal justice into something that benefited those most vulnerable to Xander's fraud. As for Kendall and me, we had slowly rebuilt our relationship on more equal footing. Weekly dinners had become our tradition, sometimes at my house, sometimes at her modest new apartment. These meals were simple affairs, nothing like the elaborate social showcases Xander had demanded, but they were genuine. 2 women sharing food and conversation without pretense or performance. "Are you joining us for Thanksgiving this year, Mom?" Kendall asked as we reached our cars. "I'm hosting at my place. Just something small. Henry, you, me, and Tobias if he's free." I smiled, remembering how far we'd come from that cold garage, with its folding table and space heater. I wouldn't miss it. As I drove home, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year. The garage dinner that had once seemed like the ultimate humiliation had become the catalyst for profound transformation, not just for me, but for everyone involved. By refusing to accept disrespect, by establishing clear and consequential boundaries, I had set in motion a reckoning that ultimately served justice on multiple levels. The woman who had eaten Thanksgiving dinner alone in a garage now sat at the center of a reconfigured family, her dignity and worth not just reclaimed, but amplified beyond anything she could have imagined. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.